Hello, everyone, and welcome to Real Estate Right Now. We talk about real estate matters that matter to you. My name is Jay Izso, and we are live here from Lindercraft Team Studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina, part of the Greater Research Triangle Park. Today's show goes against the grain. We entitled it "Welcome to the Buyer's Market," and the reason why this show goes against the grain is because we have found little breadcrumbs. Some of them are bigger than others. I might argue
boulder-sized breadcrumbs,
maybe, that indicate to us that the market, despite what a lot of the media would tell you, the housing market,
fake news media,
is actually the houses are going down. And it's really more of a buyer's market, and we're going to talk about what some of those boulder-size breadcrumbs are. Maybe they're loaves of bread, actually, that go against the grain. And so this would be a great show for you to share with your friends who are interested in buying a house, because it actually is becoming a buyer's market. We're going to talk about why that is. And so what I did is I brought back Paul Fitz, senior lender with Advantage Lending.
I think my official title is co-host of the Real Estate Right Now show.
Sometimes he comes on here so frequently. He's the guy that typically, like, I'm in a pinch because nobody gets back to me, or I can't get a hold of somebody to come on the show, or somebody cancels, and I go, hey.
The old standby.
I go, hey, listen, Paul, I need somebody to come on the show at 8:30 in the morning. So Paul is joining us this morning talking about the buyer's market. Great to see you.
Good to see you, brother.
So we do have a lot of pieces that are showing up that indicate to us that we're actually in a buyer's market, but not necessarily in the way people are thinking about it. A lot of information has come out on the media, and even local media,
right,
that says housing prices have gone up, but that doesn't appear to be really true. Steve Kruger, who is numbers. I think he's got an economics degree from Tennessee, UFT.
Does he have an economics degree? I thought his degree was in sports.
No, he's got an economics degree from the University of Tennessee. And he did an interesting piece of research with the Triangle MLS.
Yeah.
Where he was comparing prices this time a year ago to now. But what he did was he removed the new home sales.
Yeah, new construction. Yeah.
And what he found was that removing new construction, that we're actually right around 1% lower this year than we were last year in resale homes.
Yeah.
Now, that's a big one.
Yeah.
But there's some other things that you and I have talked about.
Yeah, of course.
That's one of the big giant breadcrumbs. But you've got some other things too that you're seeing in terms of, from a mortgage standpoint, in terms of, we'll talk about, what we're lending on now, which has changed some things.
Right.
But there's several other breadcrumbs. So let's talk about, not necessarily, I don't want to get into that the news is wrong. I don't want to do that. That's certainly
fake news. I just love that phrase.
So, but it has been misleading.
Well,
at the best.
Yeah, you can take data and manipulate it any way you want to create a narrative that you want.
Listen, I taught stats in college for years, and I can tell you, I can find any statistic utilizing any data. I can manipulate data any way I want to get it to say what I want.
Right. So, I'll start the easy. I want to welcome everybody to what the buyer's market actually looks like. Right. Now, how long have we been doing these How long have you been doing the show, Jay? How many years?
I think this is year 4.
Year 4. Okay. Yeah. So in at least 4 years, no one has seen a buyer's market. It's been gone longer than that.
Right.
If you go back to the 2018, 2019 timeframe when rates started really plummeting, that was what a seller's market looked like.
Right. Yeah.
People were bidding up the price of the house.
Right.
So if a house was listed at $500,000, who knows, that house, that price, the price of that house could have ended up at 575.
It could have even been 600.
Right. Could have been at $100,000 more
absolutely.
than where it was listed. The listing agent was completely justified at where they put the price of that house at that time.
Well, let's also be honest here. The buyers determined the price.
The market was driven by how many buyers we had in the market.
Because we had so many multiple offers.
Little inventory.
Low inventory.
Yep.
So many multiple offers.
Correct.
So buyers were overbidding.
Yeah.
High due diligence.
Yeah. Oh.
High due diligence.
Due diligence. Okay. I'm going to use this word and I'm using it properly. Due diligence at that period of time was weaponized to win a contract.
Absolutely it was.
Okay. Weaponized. Yeah. Due diligence now and again, we're trying to compare the markets,
right?
But now due diligence is 5,000, right? On a house that's worth 500 or 600,000. Right. At that time, due diligence may have been 100,000.
Yes.
Being on top of that purchase price.
Right.
They're like, hey, I know the list price is 500,000. I'm putting in my $100,000 due diligence.
Then I'm willing to lose
for a 600,000 purchase on your $500,000 house.
To lose it.
Correct.
To get this house.
Right. And let's take a look at inspection reports. So everybody who buys a house, almost everybody who buys a house has a home inspection. And during that period of time, if the inspection report came back with, well, this needs to be repaired, the AC is almost gone, the roof needs to be repaired, you go down the list of every single repair that was necessary, right? And the seller had your $100,000 for ransom that they did not have to let go. And they were like, I'm sorry, if you want to buy this house, we don't care to repair anything.
Right.
That is what a seller's market looked like.
Well, and in the contract then, there was a quote as is.
Yeah.
In right, which
still's there, by the way.
Well, it's changed. The verbiage has changed that in the condition that it currently exists.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, the intent of that.
Right.
But sellers had options here of not to do any repairs
at that time.
Correct. Now, it's very different story a year later.
Flip the script.
Because now sellers are doing repairs.
Oh, so home prices are dropping.
Right.
You know, you use my neighborhood, other neighborhoods, it doesn't matter. Home prices are dropping. So you start off with that. That's key number one. Somebody who had a property listed in my neighborhood, same builder, everything else a year ago, they had the house on the market last year for $700K. This year, the list price in my neighborhood is somewhere around $640, $650.
Right.
Somewhere in that realm. Right. Same builder, everything else, right? Similar square footage. Not everything is one for one, updates, whatever we want to say. But also, if you look at every single contract, I would say 90% of my contracts right now have seller concessions. They want to pay closing costs. They want to make repairs. They want to leave refrigerator, whatever it is.
Next breadcrumb.
Exactly.
It's a breadcrumb. Seller concessions are, which we didn't have
for 5+ years.
Right. Is now the breadcrumb.
Right.
That we go, okay, folks, listen, when we get this, when we get seller concessions, when we get repairs being done,
repair requests, like, well, we'll pay you $4,000 to not repair it.
Right. Or what they'll say is, now a buyer goes in and says, this carpet's really old. And they go, hey, listen, if that's going to stop you from buying the house, we'll give you a credit.
Yeah. How about $3,000 at closing and then you can recover
whatever you want. So we're seeing whatever. So we're seeing concessions, breadcrumb. Okay. We're seeing inspection reports being done, breadcrumb.
Yeah.
Okay. And so
days on market
have increased.
Days on market,
breadcrumb.
Yeah.
Resales, breadcrumb. Right. So we go ahead.
And now you've mentioned new construction, but I've seen new construction prices decrease. I give example. File I'm doing now. I'm not saying who the agent is or anything. File I'm doing now. New construction company had it listed at $310. The contract price is $299, and there's concessions.
Okay. Well, let's go a step further with the new construction piece. Okay. Because there is another breadcrumb that exists in new construction.
Yeah.
Where maybe it's not going up, and maybe not going down, but maybe it's holding still. And that's this. we are starting to see builders offer incentives to agents and also offer incentives to buyers. Breadcrumbs.
There was that period of time during the seller's market where new construction companies were basically telling real estate agents, we're only going to pay you, we'll pay you $2,500 you bring us somebody.
Right.
Otherwise, we don't care. That again was a seller's market. Now they're saying, hey, we'll pay you 3%. Please, for the love of God, bring us somebody. We're desperate.
Or they're paying a higher percentage of the commission than they were doing before because they were just offering a standard fee.
Correct.
Now they're paying commissions. They're also offering other incentives to sell their homes because when we have here comes another breadcrumb, folks. When we have a situation where builders are making concessions, are offering rebates or for purchasing a house in a specific amount of time, and we have a glut. Maybe that's strong.
It's glut a hard word.
That's a strong word. But we have a significant increase in inventory.
I mean, don't we have more inventory in our area in our MLS right now than we've had in 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, years.
I mean, is that not another breadcrumb?
That's another breadcrumb right there.
Like there's, science is funny, right? Because if you're doing an experiment and you do the same experiment over and over again and the results are still the same, then at that point you realize you have a conclusion to that experiment.
Right.
And people can speculate. Anybody can speculate right now all they want. Like, oh, we're not there. We're not this. We're not. No, we're in a solid buyer's market right now. Yeah. The one thing that hasn't really moved the needle in the eyes of buyers is still the interest rate market.
And this is the point I want to get to. Because we talk about a buyer's market, and when I say that, and I think when we say that, we're saying, actually, it's a good time to buy right now.
It's a great time to buy.
But warn the people what happens when the interest rate drops, and especially when we get below 6.
We've said this, I don't know how many times over the last few years.
Yeah.
Because rates have spiked up and because it's made housing less affordable because of the rate market by itself. But mind you,
is it affordability or is it attractability? Is it less attractive?
I don't think in the overall sense, I don't believe wages have increased enough to catch up to where interest rates went. Mm-hmm. So it decreased the ability to afford, right? If wages were going up at the same pace interest rates were going up, then it wouldn't have been an issue.
Okay, well, so then let me ask you this question. If rates are right now about what, 6 3/4?
6.875, 6 3/4, yeah.
Okay, so somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Let's say we go down below 6. Let's say it's 5.9.
Okay. Oh, the needle just all of a sudden the buying starts.
Okay.
Because it's affordability.
Okay, but what is really the difference in that less than 1% in terms
It depends on the price of the house, obviously, but you're talking hundreds of dollars every month, right? Okay. So, and to really conflate this for you, we've talked about LLPAs and how the conventional rate for a 750 borrower is still 6.875,
right?
But a 640, credit score FHA borrower, they're getting 6.25%. I have literally over the last 8 months been looking at how you are affected depending on your loan amount. If you qualify within the FHA loan amount, to say, hey, if you take this lower rate with mortgage insurance, you're still going to have a cheaper payment. Like, I'm running the numbers for people every single scenario just to make sure they're getting the best possible, purchase power. Mm-hmm. If the needle still clicks forward to, okay, so FHA is at 5.875 and conventional is still 6.75 and there's mortgage insurance, it may be a better payment for that client. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that everything is a 1-for-1 scenario, but I'm looking at other options at what creates better affordability towards that client.
Mm-hmm. So I can go with you on that. I'm not disagreeing with you on that, but I think there is an
You can.
I can.
I'll let you.
I think it's a useless argument. But I think there is an attractiveness emotionally, because if we're talking a couple $100 a month,
Sure.
which for some people is quite significant,
Right.
right? If we're talking about a couple $100 a month, right, just by going down a little less than 1%, just
Right.
getting it below 6,
Right.
right? There is an emotional impact,
Psychological.
right? An emotional psychological.
You know about psychology.
I know a little bit about that. But there is this emotional psychological impact that happens that says, I'm below 6.
Right.
Now, the same thing happened though when we were at 7. Because when we were a little bit above 7, we were 7.25, 7.5, somewhere in there. And then we dropped below 7.
Right.
We saw
started seeing a little surge. So again, remember, spike in rates, 8.5% August 2023.
Right.
That was the top that we've seen in my career since I got into business in 99. Rates were about 8.5% then.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But home prices at that time, like a really, really nice house, was $300,000 at that time.
Well, I think the median average was like 242.
Right. See, so
we're at over 400 now.
Correct. Again, everything has to shift, has to adjust. Right.
Right.
So what people are looking for, I think, in their mind is they're not understanding what kind of bargains they can have as far as the purchase power goes. The negotiation is there where it used to not be.
Right.
Like, again, if your house is on the market for 90 days, you're negotiating the price now at this point. Whereas back during the seller's market, it was on market for 4 days. It had 80 offers. And who gave me $100,000 in due diligence with $100,000 over my asking price, right? So if anybody wants to say that the pendulum was here during that period, it's now here on the buyer's market. This is where it is.
Well, I think the other thing for people who are on the fence buying right now, I think this is where we got to caution them in a positive way, and that is, you may not want to sit too long, because once that rate, if you keep waiting and that rate drops,
everybody's off the fence at the same time.
Everybody's off the fence at the same time. And then what happens is, now you're back to a possible multiple offer situation where you're competing for the house that you always wanted.
So your premise, though, you think once we crux below 6,
I do.
You feel like everybody's jumping off the fence at that point.
I think it's enough. I think just psychologically, I think it's enough for people to get into the market. Because I don't think we're going to see 3% again.
No, we're never. So let me again, 200 years of interest rate charts. We've hit 2.25% 3 times in 200 years. Right. And if you want to say, again, one was the Industrial Revolution, the other was the Great Depression, which we don't want to ever see again.
Right.
And then lastly, one was the COVID, / what were we doing at that period of time? Right. So we've only seen the lows of the lows, and we can name the 3 periods from which they appeared.
Right.
And that was 80 years from COVID to the Great Depression to hit that low. The normal interest rate market is 6 and below. And even for the majority of period of time for that, the normal interest rate market is 5, somewhere in there.
Right.
I personally believe rates will bottom out somewhere around 4.25% once we're normalized. Right. But in the meantime, I think if people start seeing 5.5, I think then they'll start heading to the door and say, I'm off the fence for good.
Yeah.
And resales. And like, people have been waiting because they
they
refied at 2.5.
Right.
They've now seen, again, 8.5. Well, if it gets down to 5.5 and I'm at 2.5, I'm closer to where I really need to be in this world.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, we had talked about it when interest rates were at 3%. And they started to climb. We had talked about that you're going to have to get used to the new normal.
Yeah.
And we which, by the way, was the normal all along.
Right.
By the way, we just got spoiled and got used to being spoiled.
Yeah, I agree. Again, you go back to the 70s and 80s when inflation spiked and rates were 12, 15%, whatever.
Right.
And then they came down. And when I got into the business at 8.5, I'm in a refi boom.
Right.
From 12 to 8.5, I'm in a refi boom right off the bat.
Right.
So people over the last few years who have had to move, who've had to endure the higher rates, had to buy during that higher spike period of time, we're about to see another refi boom.
Right.
But at the same time, when people see the lower rates, you're right. They're jumping off the fence and they're going to create a seller's market all
because
over.
because we have a lot of buyers.
Yep.
Who just don't waiting. And by the way, they're being very patient right now.
Yeah.
Which
is great, but
I don't know that it serves them right now, because as we already indicated, the resales for sure have been going down from year over year. And so waiting on that, I'm going to wait until it goes down more.
Right.
Well, if the interest rate drops,
which
by the way could happen in the next few months.
Well, I mean, rates are, like the 10-year treasury. And again, people, if you're not paying attention, mortgage rates are driven by the bond market. The Federal Reserve does not control us. Okay.
Right.
And everybody's, oh, what's the Fed doing?
Yeah.
The Fed lowered Fed funds rates back when the 10-year treasury was at 3.75 in September of last year. Interest rates on mortgages were lower then.
Right.
So when he lowered Fed funds rates, it made mortgage rates go up. You don't believe me? Go get it, go get a chart and see for yourself,
Right.
So they have to be paying attention. If they're sitting on the fence, I'm waiting for the Fed. Really, you're going to wait for the Fed, and then you're going to screw yourself.
Right.
Right.
And you brought up something I thought was interesting to me last night when we were chatting about this. Another breadcrumb.
Yeah. Oh, USDA.
Well, USDA is one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And talk about that for a second.
So for the first time in 15 plus years, USDA didn't allow us for a decade and some change to lend on manufactured housing. They're like, nah, we're not going to touch it. Stick built only. Okay. Right. Well, now USDA is lending on manufactured housing. Right. So in other words, they're loosening their lending restrictions, right, to create more buying. They're lending now on a product for 15 years they weren't lending on.
Right.
So therefore, again, that's one more breadcrumb to say that the home buyer's market is here. The buyer's market is here. Right. If you have one more tool in your belt to buy a house, that is one more thing to tell you we're in a buyer's market.
And let's be clear on this, so that we're make sure that the viewer and the listener.
And by the way, I love manufactured housing. I don't know, I mean, it's been great, and it appreciates in value, unlike a vehicle. Yeah.
Does that include trailers?
That's what manufactured housing is double wide.
But because there's
single wide.
But there's some manufactured housing that I would not call a trailer. That's
I grew up in a trailer. I'm redneck.
but it's including anything manufactured, and that includes trailers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
As well.
Yep.
Again, it is a huge breadcrumb.
Yeah.
Indicating to us
if it's one more tool,
that it's one more tool available to purchase a home. And so we're seeing these breadcrumbs. I know you alluded to it earlier, seeing all the seller concessions happening right
almost
now.
All of my contracts have seller concessions now.
We're seeing, and I think this is the other part is we said it without saying the word, but there's more negotiations available to us now that
didn't happen for 5 or 6 years.
Right.
I want all of you agents out there right now who got into the market in 2018, 2019, you got into the market in a seller's market. Maybe you don't recognize everything that's happened in that period of time to bring us to here, but this is truly a buyer's market. Days on market, home prices are down, seller concessions. Like, I don't know how many different breadcrumbs I can leave somebody to say, what market are you in right now? It's a buyer's market.
Well, and I think you alluded to something, and I thought it was, I didn't know how to weave it in, but I think I can weave it in now.
Yeah.
And that was the first time home buyer market. They're doing some things too, aren't they?
Well, I mean, so one of the things that North Carolina Housing has done recently, I am just completely mad about more than anything else.
Miffed.
Angered. They got rid of the mortgage credit certificate, which was a tool that I'd used for 20 plus years of helping first-time home buyers get a tax credit as long as they live in that property. They've removed it.
Okay.
But they've done other things to broaden their scope of how much down payment you can use in the home, first time, quote unquote, we want to say first time home buyers products, but it's really down payment assistance products is what they are.
Mm-hmm.
And they've broadened, from just a flat 3% to a 15,000. Like, they have different products available now. There are counties and cities that offer incentives, what you would call like a city second program,
Mm-hmm.
where they'll help you with down payment assistance. It's not paid back until you sell the property. Once you sell the property, then it's a second lien that's paid back. So you're not paying on it. It reduces your your payment every month because they're creating a down payment for you. So there's other programs out there.
But that's a breadcrumb.
Well,
wouldn't you say? I mean,
ish. Having the down payment assistance programs have always been there. But the truth is, during the seller's market, nobody was doing down payment assistance programs when you're bidding up $100,000 on the price of the house.
Right.
Nobody's doing those programs.
Right.
So, and again, are we using them? We are using down payment assistance more now than we have in 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So we've done our time, but there's a lot. Yeah, I know it goes fast, but I mean,
on part 2 of this.
But I think the point that we've made, and I think we've made it really, really clearly, is that there is a lot of breadcrumbs, loaves of bread that are out there that the market is reducing in price.
Correct. Reducing in price, days on market. You can go down the list, right? I challenge any agent, any agent watching this right now, look in your pipeline. Look at all the contracts that you have. See how many contracts have seller concessions. Like, you can go down the list of things that say, actually, we're in a buyer's market right now. We should be crowing about that we're in a buyer's market right now. Give your buyers the opportunity to buy now so that their equity will increase substantially when we turn into that seller's market again.
And I think we're both on the same page here that we expect rates to decrease.
Oh, they will. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Right. But and so to get in the market now is, I believe, is your best bet.
Again, everybody wants to talk about the Fed. If you ever hear anybody talk about the Federal Reserve and mortgages, you need to block that information out of your head. Okay. The 10-year Treasury is always the best barometer for what we use in our industry. I don't understand why news medias don't talk about it as much. You'll see it on CNBC or Fox Business. They'll talk about the 10-year Treasury. But to understand that
Bloomberg will too.
Right. Bloomberg. Exactly. But the 10-year Treasury note was at 4.8 at the end of December. It's 4.3 now. That's a half point lower. I mean, that doesn't just exactly translate 1-to-1, but still it's a half point lower than December. So it's telling you that rates are on the decline.
Yeah.
So
it's going to happen, when
and they're on a steady decline.
Right. And what that is, we don't know.
Yeah.
Great. This has been great stuff. The loaves of bread that have been left.
I think we've baked it at least in, forget the crumbs.
They're pretty big crumbs.
I'm thinking we're in the bakery section now at this point. Yeah.
So listen, ready to buy your next home, check out Linda Craft Team Realtors here at 7300 Six Forks Road in Raleigh, North Carolina. Looking for a mortgage?
I put people in debt for a living. That's my job, by the way.
No, he's a great lender. Tell people how to get a hold of you.
You can email me at pfitts@advantagelending.com. That's pfitts@advantagelending.com. Call me, 919-612-0043. That's 919-612-0043. Jay, as always, I appreciate being on the show.
It was fun.
Always have a great conversation.
It's great conversation.
But I hope people are really paying attention to those breadcrumbs that we've left out there.
Listen, you had a lot of choices. You chose us. We thank you very much. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube, wherever you're listening to the show via podcast. You know what we'd ask you to do? Write us a 5-star positive review. That would be great. Helps us all the time. 5 stars. We need the 5 stars wherever you're watching. 5 stars is so important. As I say to you all over the world, you know what that is. Ciao, everybody.